So we're back again for episode number 2 of A Saint a Week. And this week we have the life of Saint Anthony according to Athanasius of Alexandria. Now this video is going to be broken up into a few small segments. First being an introduction to Anthony, who was Anthony. Second being how Anthony equipped himself with virtues which will help him in his ascetic life. Then we move on to his early ascetic life, some conflicts he had with the devil. There was a lot of conflicts. And then we're moving into the back end of Anthony's life and the book, which is more focused around his influence in monasticism and the church fathers, and then Anthony's influence in the world battling Arianism. Now, if you were to close this video right now and go and read the first couple of pages of the book, you would not regret it. The true value is really in reading the full book and the full detail. This is just some of the parts I found in the book that I liked and wanted to share with you. So first of all, who was Anthony? Anthony was born into a wealthy Christian family. Anthony chose a radically different path after hearing Jesus' call to renounce possessions. He gave away his inheritance and withdrew into the Egyptian desert, where he lived a life devoted to prayer, fasting, manual labour, and solitude. His goal was complete dedication to God through simplicity and self-discipline. Anthony spent most of his life in the desert, where he became known for his spiritual insight and endurance. Stories from his life describe intense inner struggles and temptations and battles with demons. Despite seeking isolation, his reputation for holiness drew many followers and communities of monks formed around him. Now it's worth noting Anthony didn't write theological works, but his teachings were preserved through the sayings and the book of the life of Anthony, written by his friend Athanasius of Alexandria. St. Anthony is remembered as a model of humility, perseverance, and radical faith, and his life shaped the ideal of monastic living as a path of spiritual transformation and continues to influence Christian spirituality today. And again, if you close this video right now and go read the book, that would be the best thing to do. But if you want to watch, let's get into it. So number 1, introduction to Anthony. Anthony was born around 251 AD in the province of Middle Egypt, a place called Coma. He was born into a Christian family who possessed considerable wealth. Anthony was brought up with his parents in his home and knew nothing else. All his desire was, as it is written of Jacob, to live like a plain man at home. And I think most of us can resonate with this on some level, especially with all the chaos going on in the world today. Just to seclude yourself with your loved ones and live a simple life without complexities and the dangers of the world. I can see where Anthony was coming from here. Now, when Anthony was around 18 years old, both of his parents died. And according to custom, he went to church, and as he walked into the church, the gospel was being read. He heard Christ's words, "If you would be perfect, go sell what you have, give to the poor, and follow me." Anthony heard this as if it was spoken directly to him. He left the church immediately and began to give away his inheritance to the villagers. Now at this time, there were no monasteries as we know them today. Those who sought holiness lived simply near the villages. Anthony learned from older holy men, seeking them out wherever he heard of them. If he heard of a good man anywhere, like the prudent bee, he went forth and sought him, having got from the good man, as it were, supplies for his journey in the way of virtue. And Anthony kept all his desire and energy for perfecting his discipline, and he was constant in prayer, knowing that a man ought to pray in secret unceasingly. Thus conducting himself, Anthony was beloved by all. He subjected himself in sincerity to the good men whom he visited, and learned thoroughly where each surpassed him in zeal and discipline. He observed the graciousness of one, the unceasing prayer of another. He took knowledge of another's freedom from anger, and another's loving kindness. He gave heed to one as he watched, to another as he studied. One he admired for his endurance, another for his fasting and sleeping on the ground. The meekness of one and the long suffering of another he watched with care, while he took note of the piety towards Christ and the mutual love which animated all. So Anthony is spending a lot of time with people, holy men, to gain their disciplines, their virtues, to equip him for this journey of the ascetic life. Now, as we go to the early conflicts with the devil and his early ascetic life that Anthony had, he's worth noting that people used to call Anthony God Beloved, and people welcomed him as a son, as a brother, because of his virtue, because of his seeking of the ascetic life. Now, Anthony withdrew into the desert, and this is where the story really starts to unfold. We get an idea of a lot of the conflicts that went on between him and demons. So we'll start there. So as the transition in the story goes to more this battle, we find and we read that it says, "Now the devil, who hates and envies what is good, could not endure to see such a resolution in a youth, but endeavoured to carry out against him the same tricks or attacks he usually uses on other people. First of all, he tried to lead Anthony away from the discipline, whispering to him the remembrance of his wealth, claims of kindred, love of money, love of glory, and the various pleasures. Satan even attacked the young man, disturbing him by night and harassing him by day, so that even the onlookers saw the struggle which was going on between them. The one would suggest foul thoughts, and the other counter them with prayers. The one fire him with lush, the other, as one seemed to blush, fortify his body with faith, praise, and fasting." We also get an idea of an attack on lust. In the book, it says that the devil, unhappy with Anthony's zeal, one night even took upon him the shape of a woman to tempt him. But he, his mind filled with Christ and the nobility inspired by him, and considering the spirituality of the soul, quenched the coal of the other's deceit. And again, the enemy suggested the ease of pleasure, but like a man filled with rage and grief, turned his thoughts to the threatened fire and the gnawing worm, and setting these in array against his adversary, passed through the temptation unscathed. All this was a source of shame to his foe, for he, deeming himself like God, was now mocked by a young man. And he who boasted himself against the flesh and blood was being put to flight by a man in the flesh. And then we read an important line, "For the Lord was working with Anthony," which we'll come to in a minute. Now, in the desert, as Anthony was removing himself from the people, we learn of various different attacks from Satan, even one attack being very, very severe, which was the form of physical assault. And this happened in the tombs outside of the village, as Anthony retreats into abandoned tombs to work on his relationship with God. At night, demons beat him so severely he is left speechless and nearly dead. Villagers find him and carry him to a church. And one of the interesting things, or one of the things I like, as soon as Anthony wakes up, he says, "Take me back. I'm going to go back and deal with this again." He wants to be in the battle. Now, the devil appeared to Anthony in body and had a conversation with him, where the devil described himself as the friend of whoredom and the spirit of lust. Anthony, having given thanks to the Lord with good courage, said to him, "Thou art very despicable then, for thou art black-hearted and weak as a child. Henceforth I shall have no trouble from thee, for the Lord is my helper, and I shall look down on mine enemies." Having heard this, the devil fled, shuddering at the words and dreading any longer even to come near the man. We learn it after one of the battles Anthony has all night, that after through prayer and getting through the night, we learn of the Lord coming to Anthony. It says, "Nor the Lord was not forgetful of Anthony's wrestling, but was at hand to help him. So looking up, he saw the roof, as it were, opened, and a ray of light descending to him. The demons suddenly vanished, the pain of his body straightway ceased, and the building was again whole. But Anthony, feeling the help, and getting his breath again, and being freed from pain, besought the vision which had appeared to him, saying, 'Where were you? Why did you not appear at the beginning to make my pains cease?' And a voice came to him and said, 'Anthony, I was here, but I waited to see your fight. Wherefore, since you have endured, and hast not been worsened, I will forever be to thee, and will make thy name known everywhere. Having heard this, Anthony arose and prayed, and received such strength that he perceived that he had more power in his body than formerly. And at this point, he was around 35 years old. Now, moving on towards the end of the book, we learn of Anthony's influence in monasticism and the church fathers. Anthony triumphs over demons. His triumph over demons does not remain private. As word spreads, the desert fills with monks who imitate his life, transforming the wilderness into a spiritual city. Anthony becomes their spiritual father, guiding them through counsel rather than formal rule, teaching them perseverance, humility, vigilance, and love. His influence shapes the very identity of Christian monasticism, establishing the desert as a place of sanctification rather than terror. Bishops, judges, soldiers, philosophers, and common people seek him out for guidance. Even learned Greeks and philosophers are silenced by his wisdom despite his lack of formal education. Church leaders respect him deeply, and Athanasius presents Anthony as a fully obedient to ecclesiastical authority, honouring bishops and clergy while remaining independent in spirit. Through Anthony, the ascetic life is shown to be fully integrated into the life of the church, not separate from it. His life becomes a reference point for later church fathers and monastic traditions across Egypt, Palestine, and the wider Christian world. In the final phase of his life, Anthony's spiritual authority is directed toward defending the Christian faith. Though he prefers solitude, he leaves the desert when necessary to confront heresy, especially Arianism. Athanasius records that Anthony openly denounces Arian teaching as contrary to the apostolic faith, affirming clearly that Christ is eternal, uncreated, and fully divine. When Anthony comes to Alexandria, his presence strengthens the faithful, confounds heretics, and encourages bishops and believers alike. Even emperors write to him, seeking his counsel, but Anthony treats their letters with humility and reminds them that Christ alone is king. Visions granted to Anthony reveal the harm Arianism will bring to the church, and his warnings later prove true when churches are desecrated and confusion spreads. Yet Anthony reassures the faithful that heresy will not endure and that truth will prevail. By the end of his life, Anthony stands not only as a victor over Satan in the desert, but as a defender of the church in the world, uniting ascetic holiness with doctrinal fidelity. So through his discipline, the desert became a place of light. Through his faith, demons were exposed as powerless, and through his humility, the church gained a model of holiness, and through his courage, the truth of Christ was defended against error. Anthony dies peacefully, refusing honour for his body, pointing all glory to God and leaving behind not a monument, but a living tradition. Again, I strongly recommend reading the full book for yourself, because this video barely scratches the surface of Anthony's life, and as you read it, you begin to realise that this isn't just a biography, it's a mirror. The story of St. Anthony isn't really about these different things, demons in the desert, extreme fasting. It's about what happens when someone takes the words of Christ seriously, without excuses, without delay, and without compromise. You see a man who fled the world, yet ended up changing it, who sought its silence, yet became a teacher to generations, who owned nothing, yet spoke with authority to emperors, bishops, and philosophers. So I'd really recommend checking out the book. It's, again, one of my favourite books I've read, and there's a ton of value in there, and it again challenges myself to examine my own life and to try to take even the slightest bit of inspiration from Anthony's story. So thanks for watching.